this week, President Ruto spent his time at the G7 summit in France, and he went there at the invitation of the French President Emmanuel Macron. Macron, I know, Macron. In English we say Macron, but in French it's en français tu parles Macron. I speak a little French, excuse me. So he was invited there to represent the African Union, apparently, by the French President Emmanuel Macron, of course. And it's been an eye-raising trip, because a few things that have happened at that summit are a little embarrassing, to say the least. For example, there is a video clip playing around the internet. I won't document anything here today. I'll just speak. So there's a video clip of Musalia Mudavadi taking pictures of President Ruto in the corner somewhere. He was standing out there in the corner, anapiga president picha akikumbatiana na world leaders at that meeting. So that tells us the sad situation of the work that mtu kama Musalia Mudavadi anafanya. We know he's completely useless. Musalia Mudavadi ni one of the twin brothers wa Kishiba, hawasumbui. Musalia Mudavadi and Moses Wetangula, who's the Speaker of Parliament of the National Assembly. Wakishiba hawasumbui. For them, the only thing they really needed and they really wanted is just to be in power and high public office, and the only thing they do hapo ni kuweka mipango ya kutuibia sisi ushuru, and of course just eating. Like there's nothing else people like Musalia Mudavadi do in this government. In fact, the funniest thing about these President Ruto trips is how every time they go outside the country, so they fly together in the same airplane, and then Musalia Mudavadi anashuka mbio, anakimbia huko mbele kwa airport entrance ama exit pale, kumpokea rais, anamsalimia, welcoming the president to, I don't know, Norway, to Finland, to South Africa, to France. I mean, it's a complete waste of our time and resources, really. Yes, there is an element of our money being lost doing useless things, but to be honest, like our government needs to be serious about something. So I digress. Anyway, so some of the most glaring things that came out of the summit is President Ruto talking about the United Nations not being fit for purpose in the 21st century. He has done this before with the African Union. And this raised eyebrows because in 2025, President Ruto was pushing for Baba Raila Amolo Odinga, the late, to become the African Union Commission chairperson. In fact, it was late 2024 after their handshake, and then the elections were in 2025, early 2025, and he really spent money to make sure Baba becomes the African Union chairperson. Sadly, this did not go through. He failed spectacularly. Even our own neighbors up, our Tanzania or Uganda, they did not vote for Baba. So, and then after that, this was now, I think this year, sometime early this year or late last year, President Ruto went out there and said the African Union is no longer fit for purpose in the 21st century. He has repeated this talking point in France at the UN summit. And we all know that President Ruto anatumiwa na hizi nchi za magharibi, the Western nations, the United States, Europe, European countries, Britain, the UK, to kind of bring back the recolonization of Africa. They are talking about being independent of China for energy and especially rare earth minerals, these Western nations. And the only place which has that kind of abundance is Africa. Yeah, mineral resources, energy, oil, and the future of energy. So they need to find a way to get back into recolonization of Africa so that they can take away our mineral resources. And the best way to do that is when the African Union and the United Nations are weak. And when those two institutions are weak, then there will be no pushback for any imperialist agendas that are pushed into our country. A very simple example of President Ruto being used na hizi nchi za kutoka nje is the Ebola quarantine or containment center in Nanyuki. We all know that this is not, it's not an Ebola issue. It is a mineral issue. It is a rare earth mineral issue. And this is an invasion of Africa through Kenya by the United States government with their allies, the French and the British. Already we have the French troops wamepewa immunity juzi na hii serikali ya Ruto. They are in Kenya. The British in Batuk, British Army Training Unit Kenya, Batuk, has been there since we got our independence in the 60s. But kitu iko hapa, kitu ambayo inaendelea hapa, mtazamaji wangu, na ndio maana unaona President Ruto anatumiwa na hizi nchi, sawa, kuanza kuongea kuhusu kudisband the United Nations. Sawa, he's talking about the United Nations not being fit for purpose. It is a clear agenda to weaken these two global institutions, the African Union and the United Nations, and that way hizi nchi zitapata mteremko zikifika huku kwetu. Another thing that was talked about with regards to his trip in France is basically how this trip, sawa, imekuwa popularized. It's not popularized. It's okay. So this is the scenario. So kwanzia Tuesday, today is Thursday 18th. From Tuesday when he left, sawa, and the pictures of him with other world leaders, akina Trump and other world leaders started circulating. They have paid influencers on social media across Facebook, Twitter, Instagram to kind of humanize President Ruto na kuonyesha ya kwamba ati sijui he has influence outside of Africa. Like ati he is so big that the West cannot hold a meeting without him being present. It is a very silly campaign if you see it. I mean, for those who watch me from especially our mtandao wa Twitter, you have seen, I even pointed it out yesterday, it seems like there is a campaign going on to kind of humanize President Ruto na kuonyesha kwamba tipaka nyingine ati nasema sijui, you know, you can come from a very poor background, but then if God decides you are going to go places, you are going to go places. Kuna mwingine hata sijui ni nani amesema sijui hata whatever. I mean, it's a whole bunch of nonsense. You understand what I'm trying to say? I mean, what did President Ruto go with in that summit yenye is life-changing for us, for me and you, my viewer, for our fellow Africans in Algeria, in Gabon, in South Africa, in Angola, in Namibia, uko sijui wapi uko Cape Verde. Inatusaidia nini hii visit apart from yeye kubenefit financially directly by hiring the jet he owns to the government to take him to nani, apart from the stolen Zimbabwean gold yenye ameletewa juzi hapa tarehe 15 on Monday evening na that Zimbabwean convicted fraudster, the convicted fraudster from Zimbabwe, Wicknell Shivayo, because every time President Ruto flies out of the country, sawa, Wicknell Shivayo must land in Kenya before he leaves. Ni nini anamletea kama sio dhahabu imeibiwa huko Zimbabwe? So who is benefiting personally from these trips? We are not benefiting anything. If anything, this is slave trade 101. Yeah? Yani our president ndio anatuuza sisi kama wananchi, kama Waafrika, taifa letu, continent yetu yote, he is selling it for his own personal gain. So to see people running a campaign on social media, of course, it's State House, to see people, you know, trying to kind of humanize President Ruto and trying to make him feel like, you know, he's bigger than he's not. Come on, guys. Let's tuheshimiane bwana. Kwani in history we have not seen presidents kama hao. President Moi, our own President Moi here in Kenya, back in the day. He was praised, by the way, especially in the 80s. He was in the pocket here, the US, the UK. And why? It was because they were throwing debt at us. Na wakafanya hivyo in the 80s until in the late 80s, sawa, is when now nchi na collapse because we can no longer service our debt. And they swam in, and they start taking over our national assets. And happened to, I think that's in the early 90s, when now IMF, World Bank wakeka vikwazo Kenya, we can no longer borrow. That is when they started decimating our economy. And history is repeating itself with President Ruto. He's a darling of the West just because they need somewhere to enter Africa through. And the easiest place to enter Africa through is Kenya. We have a very greedy president. Rais wetu, yani ni mlafi, akona tamaa. They know that, and that is why they are using him. Who have you guys forgotten Mobutu Sese Seko of the DRC, or Zaire back in the day? He was a darling of the West. Ukiona the French presidents of then, akina Mitterrand, akina George Bush Senior, wakiongea kuhusu kina Jimmy Carter, if you saw them talk about Mobutu Sese Seko, you will think that DR Congo is a first world country and the people are rich. Oh, CG, our friend, you know, Mobutu is our friend. In fact, he's our personal friend. In fact, Mobutu Sese Seko was a personal friend of the Bushes. And you must remember George Bush Senior worked for the CIA in the late 60s and early 70s. And that is when Zaire or Zimbabwe or DR Congo kulikuwa na massive looting ya nini? Ya its mineral resources, especially gold, diamond. Belgium. Mtu kama Mugabe, don't forget Mugabe of Zimbabwe. Mugabe, when he took power back in the day, in the mid 80s, he was a darling of the West. Until Mugabe ikafika point whereby kichwa yake ikamea pembe, he came to realize that anachezwa na hawa wazungu, so he decided to take back his country. And what happened to him? Overnight, you know, he was turned into a dictator. Sanctions on Zimbabwe, hakuna kitu inatoka, hakuna kitu inaingia. That was the G7 summit. I think my worst highlight is seeing the bromance between Macron and Ruto. It is disgusting. Like everywhere, you know, wanapiga mapicha wameshikiliana mkono, they are hugging each other. You know, it's disgusting really to see. I mean, this person is selling us short, you know, he's stealing from us. And there he is, a darling of these murderous criminals from the West. And Kenyans, by the way, kuna wengine wenu hapa mko na idea ati ya kwamba ati sijui wa Amerika, sijui wa Faransa, wa British, wa Europa, ati sijui EU, France, sijui UK, US, ati will come to save us in 2027 when President Ruto attempts to steal the election. Jokes on you. Wao ndo wanamsaidia to make sure that he stays in power. They need him in power for the next 10, 20, 30 years so that they can plunder Africa. That is the plan, that is the agenda, and that is why he was invited at the G7 summit. It has nothing to do with our development, it has nothing to do with our welfare as a people. So if you're sitting there thinking ati yo sijui tutasaidiwa na US government, hakuna kitu US government na kusaidia. Wao ndio adui yako wa kwanza na wamepata fala wao wanamtumia hapo. Is President Ruto to take over our country and our continent. Nothing much really is going to come out of this trip, apart from, of course, a new scandal is loading. As usual, whenever President Ruto goes out there and he comes back with a new scandal. Kuna kitu ambayo ameuza, kuna kitu amepeana, and Personally, I'm just preparing you so that you don't wake up shocked ati uanze kusema ho jamani, yani huyu mtu yani hawezi kaa hivi, ni kama mtoto, usiguse hii, don't do this, usimwage maji, funga tap. Guys, this is your Jomba Mwabili Mogodi. Asanteni sana for tuning in as usual. I just want to take a minute to thank each and every one of you for your support. Yani comment section huwa inaniinua sana, and I'm also happy that most of you have started watching my old videos. You know, every day whenever I wake up napata notification from YouTube, you know, video nimetengeza March huko, nimeanza kuitazama upya. It is very refreshing, and asanteni. I want to thank you guys, and for those who are always supporting me via M-Pesa, asanteni sana pia. The number is 0799 428 109. This is your Jomba Mwabili Mogodi. Keep it Mwabili Mogodi TV. Thank you.